Jake tightened his grip on the rifle as he moved quietly through the dense forest. The early morning mist clung to the trees, muffling the sounds of his footsteps against the soft earth. He had been hunting for years, and this part of the woods was familiar to him. Every tree, every rock, every trail was like an old friend. But today felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a kind of unease that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He paused for a moment, scanning the area. His eyes caught movement in the distance, a flicker of brown against the green and gray of the forest. At first he thought it might be a deer, but as he moved closer he realized it wasn't moving the way an animal usually would. It wasn't running or grazing. It was just sitting there, still and quiet. Jake frowned. That wasn't normal behavior for wildlife out here. As he stepped into a small clearing, the source of the movement came into view. Tied to the base of a large oak tree was a dog. Its fur was dirty and matted, and its ribs showed faintly beneath. Its skin, as if it hadn't eaten in days. The rope around its neck was thick and rough, tied tightly enough to leave marks on its skin, but not so tight as to choke it completely. The dog looked up at Jake with wide, frightened eyes. Its tail, tucked between its legs for a moment, Jake didn't move. He wasn't sure what to make of this. Dogs weren't uncommon in these parts. Farmers sometimes let their hounds roam free. But this one seemed wrong. Something about the way it sat there, so silent and unmoving, sent a chill down his spine. Most dogs would have barked or tried to run when they saw someone approach, especially a stranger holding a gun, but this one just stared, its gaze unwavering. Jake lowered his rifle and took a step forward. "Hey there," he said softly, keeping his voice calm and steady. "What are you doing out here, huh?" The dog flinched slightly at the sound of his voice but didn't growl or snap. Instead, it let out a low whine, almost like it was pleading. Jake crouched down slowly, making sure not to startle it. Up close, he could see how thin and weak it was. Its paws were scratched and raw, as if it had been trying to dig itself free from the rope. Whoever had left it here hadn't cared much about its well-being. Jake reached out cautiously, letting the dog sniff his hand before gently patting its head. The animal shivered under his touch but didn't pull away. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm not gonna hurt you." Something shiny caught his eye as he examined the rope. Around the dog's neck was a collar, but it wasn't the kind you'd find at a pet store. This one was made of some sort of dark metal, smooth and cold to the touch. Embedded along its surface were strange markings, symbols that didn't look like anything Jake had ever seen before. They weren't letters or numbers, and they certainly weren't decorative. They looked deliberate, precise, like they meant something important. Jake ran his fingers over the markings, feeling a faint vibration beneath the metal. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He frowned, leaning in closer to get a better look. As he did, the collar emitted a soft hum, deep and resonant, like the sound of electricity coursing through wires. The noise startled him, and he quickly pulled his hand back. The dog whimpered again, pressing itself closer to the ground. "What the hell is this thing?" Jake muttered under his breath. He didn't know much about technology, but he knew enough to recognize that this wasn't ordinary. Whatever this collar was, it wasn't something you'd find on any regular dog. His mind raced with questions. Who had left this dog here? Why? Tie it to a tree in the middle of nowhere? And where had they gotten such a bizarre collar? None of it made sense. Hunters didn't use gear like this, and farmers sure as heck didn't either. This was something else entirely. Jake glanced around the clearing, half expecting to see someone watching him from the shadows. But the forest was empty, silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves overhead. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. It was as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what he would do next. After a few moments of hesitation, Jake decided to untie the dog. It didn't resist as he worked the knot loose, though it kept its wary eyes fixed on him the entire time. Once the rope fell away, the dog stood shakily, testing its legs as if it wasn't used to walking anymore. Jake stayed crouched, giving it space to adjust. "You're coming with me," he said firmly, grabbing the rope and looping it loosely around his hand. "We'll figure out what to do with you later." The dog followed him without protest, limping slightly as they made their way back toward the trail. Jake kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see someone, or something, following them. But the forest remained eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, Jake's mind was spinning with possibilities. He had no idea what he had stumbled upon, but one thing was certain. This dog, and the strange collar around its neck, wasn't normal. Not by a long shot. Whatever secrets it held, Jake knew he wouldn't be able to ignore them for long. They emerged into the sunlight. Jake stopped for a moment, looking down at the dog. Its blue eyes met his, filled with a mixture of fear and trust. For reasons he couldn't explain, Jake felt a pang of unease. This discovery was going to change everything, he just didn't know how yet. Jake led the dog through the narrow dirt path that wound its way back to his cabin. The animal walked slowly, its head low and its tail tucked between its legs. It seemed exhausted, as if it had been tied to that tree for days, or maybe even weeks. Jake kept glancing at it, trying to piece together what could have brought it to such a state. The collar around its neck still worried him. Its metallic surface gleamed faintly in the sunlight, and the symbols etched into it looked sharper now than they had in the dim light of the forest. When they reached the cabin, Jake opened the door and ushered the dog inside. Claire, his wife, was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee while flipping through an old magazine. She looked up when she heard the door creak open and immediately froze. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of the scruffy, bedraggled dog standing behind Jake. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. "In the woods," Jake replied, closing the door behind them. "It was tied to a tree." Claire set her mug down and stood up, walking over to get a closer look. The dog flinched, slightly, but didn't retreat. Claire knelt down, her brow furrowing as she examined the collar. "What's this thing around its neck? It doesn't look like any collar I've ever seen." Jake nodded. "That's what worries me. I don't know what it is, but it's not normal." Claire reached out cautiously, running her fingers over the smooth metal surface. The moment her skin touched it, she felt a strange sensation, a faint buzzing almost like static electricity. She pulled her hand back quickly, startled. "Did you feel that?" Jake nodded again. "Yeah, I noticed it too when I first found him. It's weird." Claire studied the symbols on the collar more closely. They were intricate and precise, forming patterns that seemed to shift slightly when viewed from different angles. "These markings, they're not letters or numbers. They don't match anything I've seen before." Jake crossed his arms, his expression grim. "I thought maybe it was some kind of tracking device or something hunters use, but this isn't human-made. At least I don't think it is." Claire frowned. "You mean, you think someone else put this on the dog? Someone who isn't from around here?" "I don't know," Jake admitted. "But whoever did it left it tied to a tree in the middle of nowhere. That doesn't sit right with me." The dog let out a soft whine, drawing their attention. It was lying on the floor now, its head resting on its paws. Claire sighed, her protective instincts kicking in. "We can't just leave it like this. Look at it. It's starving. We need to feed it and clean it up." Jake agreed, though his mind was still racing with unanswered questions. He grabbed a bowl from the cupboard and filled it with water, placing it on the floor near the dog. It lapped at the liquid eagerly, its tongue moving quickly. Claire rummaged through the pantry and found some leftover chicken and rice, which she warmed up and placed in another bowl. The dog ate ravenously, as if it hadn't had a proper meal in days. As the dog ate, Claire turned to Jake. "Do you think it belongs to someone? Maybe someone lost it and we should try to find its owner." Jake shook his head. "If it belonged to someone, they wouldn't have left it tied to a tree like that. And besides, no one uses collars like this. This isn't a regular pet." Claire bit her lip, clearly uneasy. "So what do you think it is then?" "I don't know. Jake said honestly. But I'm going to figure it out. Later that evening, after the dog had finished eating and drinking, Jake and Claire sat together on the couch, watching it sleep by the fireplace. The room was quiet except for the crackling of the fire and the occasional snore from the dog. Despite its rough appearance, it seemed peaceful now, curled up in a patch of warmth. Jake leaned back, rubbing his temples. This whole thing feels off, like we stumbled onto something we weren't supposed to. Claire nodded. Do you think it's dangerous? The collar, I mean. I don't know, Jake replied. But I don't want to take any chances. Tomorrow, I'll take it to Dr. Grayson. She might be able to tell us more about it. Dr. Emily Grayson was a scientist who lived in the nearby town. She specialized in studying unusual phenomena, things that couldn't easily be explained. If anyone could make sense of the collar, it was her. Claire hesitated for a moment before speaking. What if it's not natural? What if it's something alien? Jake gave her a sharp look. Alien? You really think that's possible? I don't know, Claire admitted. But you said yourself that the collar isn't human-made. And those symbols, they're too perfect, too strange. What else could it be? Jake didn't respond right away. The idea of aliens sounded far-fetched even to him. But deep down, he couldn't deny that there was something otherworldly about the collar, and maybe even the dog itself. Still, he pushed the thought aside for now. There was no point jumping to conclusions without evidence. That night, as Jake and Claire prepared for bed, strange things began happening in the cabin. At first, it was subtle. A flicker of the lights, a creak in the floorboards louder than usual. Jake dismissed it as nothing more than the wind rattling the windows or the house settling. But then the whispers started. At first, they were faint, barely audible over the sound of the fire dying down in the hearth. Jake sat up in bed, straining to listen. The whispers grew louder, overlapping each other in a language he couldn't understand. They weren't human voices, not exactly, but they carried a melodic quality that sent chills down his spine. Do you hear that? Jake whispered, nudging Claire awake. She blinked groggily, then sat up, her eyes widening as she realized what he meant. What is that? Before either of them could react, the dog bolted upright, its ears perked and its body tense. It padded silently across the room and stopped at the window, staring out into the darkness. Jake grabbed his rifle from the corner of the room and crept toward the window, peering outside. At first, he saw nothing but shadows, then movement. A figure standing at the edge of the tree line, partially obscured by the trees. It was tall and slender, its silhouette distorted in a way that made it impossible to tell whether it was human or something else entirely. Jake raised the rifle instinctively, his finger hovering over the trigger. Stay here, he whispered to Claire, who was clutching a flashlight tightly. He stepped outside, the cool night air biting at his skin. The figure didn't move as he approached, remaining perfectly still. But just as Jake was about to call out, it vanished, disappearing into the darkness as if it had never been there at all. Jake scanned the area, his heart pounding. The forest was silent again, the whispers gone. He searched for several minutes, but found no trace of the figure. Frustrated and unnerved, he returned to the cabin. When he walked inside, Claire handed him a folded piece of paper. This was taped to the front door, she said, her voice trembling. Jake unfolded it and read the 2 words scrawled in jagged handwriting, "Leave it alone." The message sent a chill through him. Whoever, or whatever, had written it knew about the dog, and they didn't want Jake meddling in its affairs. What does it mean? Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake shook his head, gripping the note tightly in his hand. I don't know, but I'm not leaving it alone. Not until I find out what's going on. The dog lay quietly by the fire, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the room. Jake glanced at it, his resolve hardening. Whatever secrets it held, he was determined to uncover them, even if it meant facing forces beyond his understanding. The next morning, Jake loaded the dog into his truck and drove to Dr. Emily Grayson's lab in town. The dog sat quietly in the passenger seat, its head tilted slightly as if it understood what was happening. Jake kept glancing at it, still unsure whether he was doing the right thing. But he knew one thing for certain. They couldn't ignore the warning note or the strange events of the previous night. When they arrived at the lab, Emily greeted them with her usual calm demeanor. She was a tall woman in her late 40s with sharp features and an air of intelligence that made people trust her instantly. Her lab was cluttered but organized, filled with gadgets, microscopes, and stacks of papers covered in notes and diagrams. When Jake explained the situation, she listened intently, her eyes narrowing as he described the collar and the mysterious symbols. "That sounds unusual," Emily said finally, stepping closer to examine the dog. "Let me take a look at the collar." Jake carefully guided the dog onto a metal examination table while Emily adjusted a bright overhead light. She donned a pair of gloves and leaned in, inspecting the collar closely. Her fingers traced the edges of the metallic band, feeling the faint hum that Jake and Claire had noticed earlier. "This isn't just a piece of jewelry," Emily muttered under her breath. She turned to grab a magnifying lens and held it over the symbols. Her expression shifted from curiosity to astonishment. "These markings, they're not random. They form patterns, almost like code. But it's unlike anything I've ever seen before." Jake crossed his arms, watching her work. "What do you think it is?" Emily hesitated before answering. "I'm not sure yet. It could be some kind of advanced technology, a communication device maybe, or—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "It's hard to say without running tests." She grabbed a small scanner and began moving it along the surface of the collar. The machine beeped softly, displaying data on a nearby monitor. Emily's brow furrowed deeper with each passing second. Finally, she stepped back and looked at Jake. "The material isn't natural," she said slowly. "It's synthetic, but far beyond anything we can produce today. And those symbols, they resemble patterns used in quantum computing, but infinitely more complex. Whoever made this has access to knowledge we can only dream of." Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. "So you're saying this isn't human-made?" Emily nodded. "It's possible. If I didn't know better, I'd say this came from somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" Jake echoed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You mean, like, aliens?" Emily shrugged. "I know how it sounds, but when you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. This collar doesn't belong here. Not in our world, at least." Before Jake could respond, the dog suddenly stood up, its ears perked and its body rigid. It let out a low growl, staring at the corner of the room. Jake and Emily exchanged puzzled looks before turning to see what had caught the dog's attention. There was nothing there, at least nothing visible, but the air seemed to shimmer slightly as if heat waves were distorting the space. "What's going on?" Jake asked, gripping the edge of the table. Emily shook her head, her eyes wide with wonder. "I don't know, but it's reacting to something." The dog barked sharply, startling both of them. In that instant, a holographic image burst forth, from the collar projecting itself onto the wall. It was a map, a detailed three-dimensional rendering of the surrounding area. Jake recognized landmarks like the forest where he had found the dog, as well as unfamiliar locations marked by glowing dots. Emily approached the projection cautiously, studying it with fascination. "This must be important," she murmured. "Look at these coordinates. They point to a specific location deep in the wilderness." Jake frowned. "Do you think that's where it came from? Wherever it is?" "It's possible," Emily replied. "Whoever or whatever left. This dog tied to a tree wanted us to find it, and now it's leading us somewhere." Later that day, Jake returned home and told Claire everything that had happened at the lab. She listened silently, her face pale as she processed the information. When he mentioned the map and the glowing coordinates, she let out a shaky breath. "So you're saying this is some kind of alien thing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what else to call it," Jake admitted. "But I have to check it out. If this collar really came from somewhere else, then we might be dealing with something bigger than we realize." Claire looked worried. "What if it's dangerous? What if whoever left that note comes after you?" Jake placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I'll be careful. I won't go alone. I'll take Emily with me. She knows what she's doing. Despite her fears, Claire reluctantly agreed. She helped Jake pack supplies for the trip: food, water, flashlights, and a first aid kit. As they worked, the dog stayed close by, watching their every move with intelligent eyes. It was as if it understood what was about to happen and approved. Early. The next morning, Jake and Emily set out for the location marked on the map. The dog trotted alongside them, its energy renewed despite its earlier exhaustion. The journey took them deep into the wilderness, far beyond the trails Jake usually explored. The terrain grew rougher, with steep hills and dense thickets blocking their path. But the dog never faltered, guiding them confidently as if it knew exactly where they were headed. As they climbed higher, the air grew colder and the trees became sparser. By mid-afternoon, they reached a clearing dominated by a massive structure partially buried in the earth. It looked ancient, yet impossibly futuristic, its surface covered in the same symbols etched into the collar. The metal gleamed faintly in the sunlight, untouched by rust or decay. Jake stared at it in awe. What is this place? Emily approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity outweighing her fear. It's some kind of ship or part of one. Look at the design. It's aerodynamic but not built for our atmosphere. The dog bounded forward, stopping at the base of the structure. It pawed at the ground, revealing a hidden panel embedded in the dirt. With a soft hiss, the panel slid open, revealing a narrow passageway leading downward. Jake glanced at Emily. Are we really doing this? She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. We've come this far. We need to see what's inside. They followed the dog into the passageway, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The walls were smooth and metallic, humming softly with energy. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the ceiling, casting eerie shadows on the floor. The air smelled metallic, like electricity crackling in the distance. At the end of the tunnel, they entered a large chamber filled with glowing panels and alien artifacts. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested another collar identical to the one on the dog. The sight sent a jolt of recognition through Jake. Whatever this place was, it was connected to the dog, and to the collar. The dog leapt onto the pedestal, standing perfectly still as the room lit up with blinding light. Voices, not human, but melodic and resonant, filled the space, speaking directly into their minds. Jake and Emily froze, overwhelmed by the sensation. We are travelers, the voices said, stranded on your world long ago. Our companions carry fragments of our essence designed to bridge the gap between us and those who find them. Jake swallowed hard, struggling to process what he was hearing. You're aliens? Yes, the voices confirmed. And you have found one of our lost companions. Help us and we will share knowledge that will advance your civilization beyond imagination. Emily's eyes widened with excitement, but Jake remained cautious. Why should we trust you? You have no reason to, the voices replied. But know this. Helping us means aiding not only yourselves but all beings across the stars. The dog transformed before their eyes, shedding its canine form to reveal a sleek, humanoid silhouette. Its blue eyes glowed brightly as it spoke, telepathically. Thank you. Jake and Emily exchanged stunned looks. Whatever decision they made next would change everything, for better or worse. Jake stood frozen, his mind struggling to catch up with what he was seeing. The dog, or rather the creature that had been disguised as a dog, was no longer an animal. Its sleek, humanoid form radiated an otherworldly presence. It moved gracefully, its glowing blue eyes locking onto Jake and Emily with a mixture of gratitude and urgency. The transformation was both fascinating and unsettling, leaving them speechless. Emily broke the silence first, her voice trembling with awe. This changes everything. Jake nodded slowly, though his thoughts were racing. He glanced at the pedestal in the center of the chamber, where the second collar rested. The voices from earlier still echoed faintly in his mind, their melodic tones lingering like a distant song. "They said they're stranded," he murmured, "that they need our help." "Yes," Emily agreed, stepping closer to the pedestal. "But helping them isn't just about repairing their ship or letting them leave. They offered us knowledge that could change humanity forever." Jake frowned, his instincts pulling him in two directions. On one hand, the idea of gaining access to advanced technology and understanding was tantalizing. It could solve so many problems on Earth, curing diseases, ending poverty, advancing science beyond anything humans had achieved. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the risks. Power like that could corrupt people, lead to wars, or even destroy the planet if misused. "What happens if we say no?" Jake asked quietly. "What if we destroy the collars and walk away?" Emily hesitated, her expression thoughtful. "We'd be protecting humanity from potential harm, but we'd also be turning our backs on something incredible. An opportunity to connect with another species, to learn from them, to grow." The alien companion tilted its head as if listening to their conversation. Then it spoke again, its telepathic voice calm but firm. "Your choice will shape the future, for your world and ours. We do not wish to force your hand, but know this: time is limited. Our ship cannot remain hidden much longer." Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, heavier than anything he'd ever faced before. He looked at Emily, who seemed torn between excitement and fear. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know. Part of me wants to trust them, to believe that they mean well, but I can't shake the feeling that we're playing with fire here. This kind of power, it's dangerous." Jake nodded, glancing back at the alien. Its gaze was steady, patient. It wasn't demanding or threatening. It was simply waiting. That made the decision harder. If these beings had wanted to take what they needed by force, they could have done so already. Instead, they were offering a choice, trusting Jake and Emily to decide. "We can't make this call alone," Jake said finally. "It's too big for just us." Emily nodded. "You're right. We'll need to involve others, people who can weigh the pros and cons, who understand the implications." Later that evening, after returning to the lab, Jake and Emily called together a small group of trusted individuals. Among them were Dr. Lewis, a physicist known for his work on theoretical technologies, Maria, a journalist specializing in investigative reporting, and Harold, a retired military officer with experience in crisis management. They gathered in Emily's lab, where she explained everything that had happened, from finding the dog in the forest to discovering the alien ship and hearing the voices. At first, the group was skeptical. The story sounded unbelievable, like something out of a science fiction movie. But when Emily showed them the holographic map projected by the collar and described the alien companion's transformation, their skepticism began to fade. By the time Jake recounted the offer made by the voices, the room was filled with tension and quiet murmurs. "This is insane," Maria said finally, breaking the silence. "If what you're saying is true, then we're talking about contact with extraterrestrial life. This isn't just a discovery, it's history. But it's also a risk," Harold added gruffly. "If we let them leave and share their knowledge, we have no way of controlling how it's used. People will fight over it. Governments will weaponize it. It could tear the world apart." Dr. Lewis leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Or it could save us. Imagine curing cancer overnight, solving climate change, creating unlimited energy sources. The benefits outweigh the risks, if we handle it responsibly." Jake listened intently, weighing each argument. He knew there was truth in both sides. Humanity had proven time and again that it couldn't always be trusted with great power. Wars, greed, and corruption had shaped the course of history. But wasn't it worth taking a chance? If they turned their backs on the aliens now, they might never get another opportunity like this. "I think we should help them," Emily said softly, drawing everyone's attention. "Not because I'm blind to the risks, but because I believe in the potential for good. These beings came to us peacefully. They gave us a choice. Isn't that proof enough that they mean no harm?" Maria nodded slowly. She's right. If we refuse, we're sending a message, not just to them but to ourselves, that we're too afraid to reach for something greater. Harold crossed his arms, clearly unconvinced. And if it goes wrong, what then? Then we deal with it, Jake replied firmly. We can't let fear stop us from doing what's right. These aliens are stranded just trying to get home. If we can help them, we should. After hours of debate, the group reached a consensus. They would activate the final sequence on the pedestal, allowing the aliens to repair their ship and leave Earth. In return, the aliens promised to share their knowledge, but only under strict conditions. The information would be released gradually, overseen by a global council tasked with ensuring it was used responsibly. The next morning, Jake, Emily, and the others returned to the alien ship. The dog-turned companion greeted them warmly, its humanoid form radiating warmth and trust. Together they approached the pedestal, where the second collar still rested. Emily placed her hands on the device, following instructions whispered into her mind by the alien voices. A soft hum filled the chamber as lights flickered across the walls. Suddenly, the entire structure began to vibrate. Panels shifted, revealing hidden mechanisms. The air crackled with energy as the ship powered up, preparing for departure. The alien companion stepped back, joining the others as the process unfolded. It's working, Emily breathed, her eyes shining with wonder. Jake watched silently, his heart pounding. This was it. The moment that would change everything. As the ship ascended into the sky, leaving behind only a faint shimmer, he felt a mix of relief and sadness. They had helped an entire species regain their freedom, but at the cost of losing something extraordinary forever. Back home, life slowly returned to normal. The group kept their discovery secret, knowing the world wasn't ready for such a revelation. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was far stranger and more connected than anyone realized. One evening, as he sat by the fire with Claire, he glanced at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, new friends were traveling onward, carrying a piece of Earth with them. Jake and Emily stood frozen in the glowing chamber, their minds racing to make sense of what they had just witnessed. The dog, or rather the creature that had once appeared as a dog, now stood before them in its true form. It was humanoid, with smooth, silvery skin and piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. Its movements were graceful, almost fluid, as if it existed on a plane beyond human comprehension. The voices from earlier continued, speaking directly into their minds, calm and steady. We are travelers, the voices repeated as if sensing their disbelief. Our ship crashed on your world many years ago. We have been stranded here ever since. Emily took a step forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. How long have you been here? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Centuries, came the reply. Your time moves differently than ours. What feels like an eternity to us is but a blink in your history. Jake frowned, still struggling to process everything. Why didn't you try to contact us sooner? Why leave clues like the collar and the map? We cannot communicate directly with your kind, the voices explained. Your minds are not yet ready for such interaction. The collars act as bridges, allowing us to connect with beings who show kindness and understanding. You found one of our companions abandoned and forgotten. That was no accident. The humanoid figure gestured toward the pedestal at the center of the room. On it rested another collar identical to the one around the creature's neck. This device holds vital information needed to repair our ship and return home, but activating it requires cooperation from someone like you. Emily glanced at Jake, her expression torn between awe and caution. What kind of information are we talking about? She asked. And what happens if we help you? The voices paused as if considering how best to answer. The knowledge within the collar could transform your world. Medicine, energy, technology, all would advance by millennia. But there is risk. Such power can corrupt or destroy those unprepared for it. Jake clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He understood the weight of their decision. Helping these beings meant giving humanity access to unimaginable advancements, but it also meant trusting strangers from another world. Strangers whose intentions, despite their words, remained unclear. "What happens if we say no?" Jake asked finally, his voice firm. "If you refuse, we will remain stranded," the voices replied. "But the knowledge contained within the collar will be lost forever. Your choice determines not only our fate, but the future of your species." Back outside the ship, Jake and Emily sat on a fallen log, the cool evening air wrapping around them like a blanket. The alien companion stood nearby, watching silently as they debated their next move. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. "I want to believe them," Emily said finally, breaking the silence. "Imagine what we could do with that kind of knowledge. Cures for diseases, clean energy sources, solutions to problems we've been fighting for generations. It's incredible." "But what if it's too much?" Jake countered. "Humans aren't exactly known for using power responsibly. Look at the mess we've made of this planet already. What happens when everyone wants a piece of whatever they're offering?" Emily sighed, knowing he had a point. "Still, think about the possibilities. This could change everything. For the better." Jake shook his head. "Or it could tear us apart. Power like that? It doesn't come without consequences." They fell silent again, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. The forest around them seemed quieter than usual, as if even nature was holding its breath, waiting to see what they would choose. After a while, Jake turned to Emily. "What do you think we should do?" She hesitated, her brow furrowing. I think we should help them. Yes, there's risk involved, but isn't that always the case with progress? We can't let fear stop us from moving forward." Jake nodded slowly, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. "Okay, let's do it." Inside the ship, they returned to the chamber where the pedestal awaited. The alien companion stepped onto the platform once more, standing beside the second collar. The room hummed with energy as the symbols along the walls began to glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the creature's movements. Emily approached the pedestal cautiously, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch the collar. The moment, her fingers brushed against it, a surge of warmth spread through her body, followed by a flood of images and sensations. She saw flashes of distant planets, strange landscapes, and advanced civilizations working together in harmony. It was overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. Jake watched her closely, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's beautiful." The alien companion placed its hand over hers, completing the connection. A blinding light filled the room, enveloping all three of them in its brilliance. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. When the light faded, the chamber was quiet once more. The pedestal was empty, and the companion's collar now glowed faintly, its surface shifting and changing as if alive. The creature turned to face them, its blue eyes filled with gratitude. "You have done well," the voices said, echoing softly in their minds. "Because of your courage, we may now return home. And because of your trust, your world will inherit a gift beyond measure." Jake exhaled sharply, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "What happens now?" "The collar contains the knowledge we promised," the voices replied. "Guard it wisely. Use it to build a brighter future, not only for yourselves but for all life." With that, the companion stepped back onto the pedestal. The floor beneath it began to rise, carrying it upward toward the heart of the ship. Panels slid shut, sealing the chamber off from view. Moments later, the entire structure shuddered, emitting a low hum that grew louder and louder. Jake and Emily stumbled backward, shielding their eyes as the ship began to ascend. It hovered briefly above the ground, casting a brilliant light across the clearing before shooting skyward with incredible speed. Within seconds, it disappeared into the clouds, leaving behind only silence. As they stood there, staring up at the empty sky, Jake felt a strange mixture of emotions: awe, sadness, and hope. They had helped an entire species regain their freedom, but at the same time, they had opened a door to possibilities both wondrous and terrifying. Emily broke the silence first. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Jake shrugged, managing a small smile. "Only time will tell, but I guess we'll find out soon enough." They gathered their things and began the long trek back to the truck, the alien collar safely tucked into Emily's bag. The forest seemed different now, less menacing somehow. As they walked, Jake glanced at the stars peeking through the treetops. Somewhere out there, new friends were traveling onward, carrying a piece of Earth with them, and perhaps someday they would meet again. Jake and Emily returned home late that night, their minds still reeling from the events in the forest. The alien collar sat securely in a padded case inside Emily's bag, its faint hum a constant reminder of the responsibility now resting on their shoulders. Neither of them spoke much during the drive back, each lost in their own thoughts about what had happened and what was to come. When they finally reached Jake's cabin, Claire was waiting for them, her face pale with worry. She had spent the day pacing the house, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. When she saw the look on Jake's face, her fears only deepened. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Are you okay?" Jake nodded, though his expression remained serious. "We're fine, but a lot went down today." He and Emily quickly filled Claire in on everything: the ship, the alien companion, the knowledge contained in the collar, and the decision they had made. Claire listened silently, her eyes wide with disbelief. When they finished, she sank into a chair, shaking her head. "You're telling me you just helped aliens leave Earth," she said slowly, as if trying to process the words. "And now we have some kind of super advanced technology sitting in our living room?" "That's about the size of it," Jake replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not exactly how I planned my week either." Claire let out a shaky laugh, though there was no humor in it. "This is insane. What are we supposed to do with it? Just keep it here, hand it over to someone else?" Emily stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. "We can't give it away. Not yet. This knowledge is too important, too powerful. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could cause chaos. We need to figure out how to use it responsibly." "And how do we do that?" Claire shot back. "None of us are scientists or world leaders. How are we supposed to handle something like this?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But we'll figure it out together, one step at a time." Over the next few days, life at the cabin settled into an uneasy routine. Jake and Claire went about their daily chores, while Emily spent hours studying the collar, trying to decipher its secrets. It wasn't easy. The symbols etched into its surface seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of light, making it nearly impossible to pin down any patterns. Still, she worked tirelessly, determined to unlock even a fraction of its potential. Meanwhile, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every time he stepped outside, he scanned the tree line, half expecting to see the same shadowy figure from before. But the woods remained silent, almost unnaturally so. Even the animals seemed to have vanished, leaving behind an eerie emptiness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake joined Emily at the kitchen table. She was surrounded by notebooks filled with sketches and notes, her brow furrowed. In concentration, he placed a cup of coffee beside her and sat down. "Any luck?" he asked quietly. Emily sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Not really. This thing is way beyond anything I've ever seen. It's like trying to read a book written in a language no one speaks." Jake frowned. "Do you think it's safe? I mean, what if it does something we can't control?" "I don't think it's dangerous," Emily replied after a moment. "At least not intentionally. From what the aliens said, it's designed to share knowledge, not harm anyone. But yeah, we should be careful. There's no telling what kind of impact this could have." Just then, Claire walked into the room, holding a piece of paper in her, and her expression was grim. "You might want to take a look at this." She handed the paper to Jake, who unfolded it and read aloud. "Stop meddling. Forget what you saw." It was another warning note, identical to the one they had found on their door days earlier. Jake's jaw tightened as he crumpled the paper in his fist. Whoever wrote this isn't happy we helped the aliens. Claire crossed her arms, her voice sharp with frustration. Maybe they're right, maybe we shouldn't have gotten involved. No, Jake said firmly. We did the right thing. Helping those beings go home. It was the right call. Whoever's threatening us doesn't get to decide that. Emily nodded in agreement. They're scared. That's why they're trying to intimidate us. But we can't let fear stop us from doing what needs to be done. Despite their determination, the note cast a shadow over the household. For the rest of the week, Jake kept his rifle close at hand, and Claire insisted on keeping all the doors locked at night. The sense of unease lingered, a constant reminder that they weren't alone in this. A month passed and Emily finally made a breakthrough. After countless hours of study, she discovered that the collar responded to touch in specific ways. By running her fingers along certain patterns of symbols, she could trigger bursts of information, images, sounds, and even fragments of text that appeared directly in her mind. It was overwhelming at first, like trying to drink from a fire hose, but gradually she began to make sense of it. It's incredible, she told Jake and Claire one evening, her eyes shining with excitement. This thing contains answers to questions we didn't even know to ask. Clean energy sources, medical treatments, sustainable farming methods, it's all here. And it's all real. Jake leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Can we use it, like right now? Emily hesitated. Not yet. The information is complex, and we'd need help from experts to implement it properly. But we're getting closer. Once we understand more, we can start sharing it with the world carefully. Claire looked skeptical. And what happens when people find out where it came from? Are we supposed to tell them aliens gave it to us? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Jake said firmly. For now, our priority is figuring out how to use it safely. Everything else can wait. As the weeks turned into months, word of their discovery began to spread. Slowly at first, then faster than they could have imagined. Someone must have seen Emily working late nights in her lab or noticed the strange equipment she brought home. Whatever the reason, rumors started circulating about a mysterious artifact hidden in the woods. Journalists, conspiracy theorists, and even government agents began showing up in town, asking questions and poking around. Jake and Emily knew they couldn't hide forever. Eventually, they would have to reveal the truth, but not yet. They needed more time to prepare, to ensure that the knowledge contained in the collar would be used for good and not for greed or destruction. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars, Jake turned to Emily. Do you think they'll believe us when we tell them where this came from? Emily smiled faintly. Some will, others won't. But that's not the point. The point is giving humanity a chance to grow, to become better than we are now. Jake nodded, staring up at the vast expanse of the night sky. Somewhere out there, the alien travelers were continuing their journey, carrying with them the hope that the gift they left behind would be used wisely. I guess we'll never really know if we made the right choice, he said softly. No, Emily agreed, but sometimes faith is all we've got. And with that, they sat in silence, letting the weight of their decision settle over them like the quiet embrace of the universe. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they faced them together, with courage, curiosity, and the unshakable belief that the future was worth fighting for.